Evening, everybody. Just waiting for Marcus to join us, and then we'll get cracking with tonight's training talk or reflection Sunday, whatever you might want to call it. Just wait a couple of moments for Marcus to get with us. Just let him catch up. In the meantime, I hope you've all had a lovely weekend. Hope you've had a nice day. Enjoying the last little bit of sun that came out yesterday, anyway. How was your pizza? That's a good question, Karen. Yeah, it's good. Very good, thanks. So just waiting for a couple of moments, just waiting for Marcus to join us, and then we'll crack on. It's a nice chilled out evening, chilled out session this, so you want to grab yourself a glass of wine or a beer, just nice and relaxed. We're just going to talk through a few things. It's all about reviewing our previous week's training and looking forward to the following week, so looking forward to next week. And if we can give you any hints and tips or things to look at, things to think about, then obviously that will hopefully help you. So, all right, we're just just waiting for Marcus to join us, and then we'll get cracking. But in the meantime, like I said, grab yourself a glass of wine, put the kettle on, grab yourself a cup of tea, and get ready for a half an hour or so of just fairly chilled out, fairly nice, easy going running chat. There's nothing better than that on a Sunday evening. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in here, and we'll answer them as the evening goes. So bear with me on 1 second. Good to see so many of you watching. No pressure for us to give you a full evening's entertainment. There's a really good question there from Scott. We'll add that to the list of things to ask, to talk about, Scott. Yeah, good question. Stick your questions in the comments, guys, if you've got any. And then we'll just have just a nice informal chat about all these little questions that you've got. Try and keep them focused on the last couple of weeks or last week, and then with a view to looking forward into next week. So, if you've got questions for much further down the line, feel free to. Marcus is here. He's trying to get in. Bear with me 1 second. IT never works when you want it to. I'll try not to keep you too much longer, guys. So feel free, pop the kettle on, get yourself a glass of wine. I'll be with you in 2 seconds. Just try and get Marcus on the call, and then we're ready. So we'll go through a couple of questions that we've got there though so far. So Scott's first question from Scott was, where's the best place to find core exercises currently? It's just legs and mileage. So yeah, it's building your legs, building the strength in your legs is really, really important. Having good, strong legs is incredibly important. So good quality exercises such as squats, lunges, things like that. You can add power into them, so you can add jumps, and you have a jumping squat, a jumping lunge, and that adds a little bit of extra power into your exercise. So that's a really good way of building strength into your legs. But in terms of core exercises, obviously the standard really good quality core exercise is a plank, so a good quality plank. You can do side plank. Coming on, so you'll have two of us in a second. But yeah, we'll bring Marcus in on that question in a minute. He'll probably have his own thoughts on that. So bear with it a second. But yeah, core exercises, anything that works from about here down to about your knees. I class as a core exercise. That's the main chunk of your body, the main core of your body. Your hips is a good one. I definitely mention working on your hips. Absolutely. It's a sorry, I'm just having a bit of IT as always. But your hips, definitely work on hips. Hips is a big one. It's end up if you've ever seen
we got there.
So I was just asking a question as well as fiddle through my. So I apologise for anyone who's watching then. A little couple of 3 words at a time. I was trying to fill out. Apologies, but yeah, Marcus, welcome to the call.
Hi, it's well, we got there, didn't we? We got there. I've had to do it on my phone. I was sat with my laptop thinking I'd be able to join, and it just wouldn't let me at all. So my phone had saved the day.
The more I get, the more I everything get your phone with. It's far better. But yeah, so I was just talking to a couple of questions. There's already been a couple of questions asked Marcus. But I just set the scene a little bit about what questions really. As it was your Marcus to come up with Sunday reflect. Talk about what we want to achieve with them.
I think we're getting a bit of echo on the line. People keep saying the sound's breaking up, Rich, and it was then. When I was listening to it was breaking up. I got some of it, but I think people have missed some of it as well. Although now you sound a bit better.
How is that? If I hold it?
Yeah, that sounds a lot better. That's weird.
Right, there we go. I'll just have to hold it rather than something. I'll hold it.
So I
was just sort of saying, it's your idea really, these sessions, Marcus. So do you want to just sort of like tell everyone what they could expect over the next few weeks?
Yeah, I just thought that what we could do is on a Sunday, it seems like a good point on a Sunday evening to reflect on the training and have a think about the training that people have done in the week, see what we can learn from that so that can inform maybe what we do the week after. And I think the idea is with 27 weeks, there's still plenty of time, obviously, to train for a marathon. But before we know it, it'll be 20 weeks and then it'll be 16 and people will be starting formal plans. So it's probably a good idea to start thinking about that as like a sort of habit that we could get into. I think it just might help to make life a little bit easier for everybody if we fall into that habit of reflecting and then setting some little targets for ourselves for the week ahead. It might help. I've just got a couple of ideas of how we could do that.
Absolutely. I think it's always good to take that time out, isn't it, to review your training.
Yeah.
And look forward and just look at it as it is now, rather than look at it maybe a month down the line or 2 months down the line, where it could be too late to change it.
Yeah, that's it. It's a brilliant time to do it. We've got, how long? Got 6 months, I think. 27 weeks, I think it is today. So 27 weeks time, those quads will be sore. It's the perfect time to start. So go on, how's your training going, Rich?
Well, do you know what? I think last week was probably, without sounding too negative, my worst training week I've had for a long time. I think I had a funeral to attend on Wednesday, my uncle's funeral on Wednesday, so that was obviously quite a heavy week every day, really. But also, the sound is still struggling, I think. I'm going to play about the phone. I don't know what's going on. Does it sound right for you, Matt? There's a couple of people still saying can't tell what I'm saying.
It's not too bad now. There we go.
I'll keep trying. See if that sounds any better.
Stay still.
So I was saying, last week training wasn't great. People are still struggling to hear it. I don't know what
Have you got pizza in that microphone from the other day?
You know what? I probably got water in my microphone from my run this afternoon.
Yeah, I think that is, you know. It sounds like an IT problem rather than the line itself.
Yeah. Certainly not this end, do you think? We've got it open on 2 devices, but no, I haven't. Definitely not. I'm not sure. If anything, it's probably got water in my phone from my room. I've not had an issue with it before. And it's not going to work on my laptop because you've already tried it on your laptop.
My wife just sent me a message saying that she can hear me, but not you.
Very odd. Very odd. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll give you a tour of my house at the same time. Bear with me one.
Because we got the same setup as the lads used the other night, and it worked perfectly then.
Yeah. Okay, how's that?
That sounded fine. Yeah, and all that crackling noise has gone as well.
Okay, well maybe we'll try that. Hopefully
it might be water in your microphone. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put my phone in some rice. That serves me right for going running for 2.5 hours this afternoon in the rain.
Well, there you go. You're answering my question anyway.
But hopefully that's better for everybody. Do say if
that's
no good, and we'll try again. But yeah, so last week was a bit of a washout, so to speak, for my training. But that's probably why I went out this afternoon and did quite a long run, because I just needed to get out, clear my head, get some miles in, and just sort of set myself off for next week, really. So, yeah, gym's closing didn't help. I was hoping to do quite a bit of swimming. So obviously from Thursday, the gym's closing. Yeah, my swimming plans went out the window. But yeah, never mind. It is what it is. We'll crack on and hopefully pick up some stuff next week, and just be a little bit. Fit those runs in when I need to, rather than trying to fit them all in on a Sunday and do it all in one go.
Yeah. Do you ever more formally plan than that, or do you ever more formally reflect? Because that's what we're sort of thinking we might talk about, just like a really simple way of just making it a little bit, not formal, that's the wrong word, but a bit more structured, so that it actually happens rather than hoping it'll happen.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I definitely do. I mean, obviously, it comes down to time management, doesn't it, really? I think all of this comes down to managing your time. And we all have our conflicting priorities that we have during the week, be it work, family, other things going on. And you vary what's important to you, don't you? Yeah. So at that point in time, and I suppose when it comes to starting the week, it's picking out what your priorities for that week. And so, well, actually, I've got more time this week. If you took, say, for example, half term, and your kids are off work, you might have more time to sort of be a bit more flexible, maybe, because you've not got that rigid routine, maybe. So you might think, well, actually, I can steal an hour or two here or there, or to go running or go to the gym or whatever it might be. So I think. Yeah, it's definitely every week you start the week saying, right, this is what I want to do with my week this week. As always, there's always things that get thrown in, isn't there? That you realise, actually, I've not got time to do that anymore. I've not got time to do that anymore. It's difficult though, isn't it?
Yeah. Have you ever come?
What about you, Marcus?
Yeah, training's going all right. It's going all right. I've spent a lot of this year sidelined, really. I have problems with my hips, putting it bluntly, and that just stems from glutes that are getting weaker, hamstrings getting very tight, the bottom of my back can get very tight, so I have to spend quite a lot of time just trying to prevent that. But it has actually stopped me running on a couple of occasions this year for extended periods of time, and then with lockdown and everything else, sort of struggled a little bit, but that's no different from anybody else, really. But yeah, I feel like I'm finally starting to get back into things a bit. Just ticking them off, keeping it nice and simple at the minute. So there's not really a massive structure to it. Just a fair amount of easy-ish running, really. Trying to build that base again.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important bit at this point in the running journey for the marathon. It's you've got to realise you don't actually have to be smashing out the miles at this point in time, do you? It's about building that foundation. I refer to it as like building a house. So you're putting your good quality foundations in now, and then as you get closer to it, you're building the floors of your house. And then the last few weeks before you start tapering, you're putting the roof on and you're furnishing it, and then you've got the race, and you're ready to move in then, so to speak. Yeah. So
that's it. It's quite a useful analogy, and of course you need the foundations before you can do anything, really. I think that's the key thing. That's the key thing. Rich, have you? We were just messaging earlier. Ever come across this idea of doing a SWOT analysis? Have you ever done that?
I've never done that when it comes to my training.
Have you done it elsewhere in your life, sort of business or?
In business, yes, but in training, never. And I would never even think to either.
Well, that's what I was sort of thinking we might talk about a little bit, because that's a really useful tool that can take sort of 5 minutes to do. And SWOT really just means, I'm sure a lot of people know this, that you think about, or the way in which I do it with regard to running anyway, is I look back at the previous week and think, well, what were the strengths of that week? what went well, what were the runs that I felt good on, and maybe just try and unpick why they went well. And that might be nutritional, they went well, or the weather was good even. But why did they feel good? And then I think the W, think about some of the weaknesses in that week. Some people might not like the word weaknesses. They might think about areas for development. And that could be something like time management. That's often one for me. Sometimes my runs do get squeezed out. Sometimes that's my fault. Sometimes it just isn't. And it's worthwhile trying to work out which is which sometimes. Sometimes they don't go well because I often have to train sort of 8 o'clock-ish at night. And I can't go from lunchtime until sort of 9 in the evening without eating. But particularly at this time of year, sometimes eat a bit too much, maybe at sort of 5, half 5-ish. So that might be an area for development. And I just spend a bit of time just thinking about those things. And then before the week ahead, think about what are the opportunities for the week ahead. Where are the opportunities that I've got to run and to train? And then I actually put them into my calendar, just so that time's blocked out then as far as possible. Obviously, it doesn't always work like that. But that's what I try and do. And the T for the SWOT analysis is it just means the threats. So I just think about what might threaten that training in the week ahead. What are the things that I know, particularly work-wise, that might crop up? What are the meetings that might overrun? And then I would leave a meeting feeling, I can't, I'm just too tired to run, and so on. And a lot of the time, you can just do it on a piece of paper and divide it into 4. And it works really well, I think. Because I think as runners, we often spend a lot of time thinking about running. We spend a lot of time talking about running, and daydreaming about running, and listening to podcasts about running, and doing Facebook Live about running, and trying to get the sound work. And I just think sometimes that spending that 5 minutes can often make the whole thing a bit more productive. I'm like a lot of runners, I can sometimes feel a bit frustrated if I plan to run and do a particular session or a particular run or hit a particular mileage, and then when it doesn't quite work out, I can get a little bit frustrated. Don't mind admitting that. But I do find that doing that little SWOT analysis really helps.
That's a really good approach to making your review to your training a little bit more formal, isn't it? Rather than just not like maybe the approach I take. Oh, it was rubbish last week, I'll make it better this week.
See, that's as a teacher. That's what I do for a living. So I'd sort of like to think that the feedback needs to be a bit more specific than that. We have to. But I think there is a serious point to that, because running by very nature is repetitive, and what we don't want to be doing is repeating things that aren't necessarily going to serve us in the medium term and in the longer term. Practice doesn't necessarily make perfect. We've got to be practicing the right things really at the right time. And I think just doing that little SWOT, and there's other ways of doing it, but just doing that sort of little SWOT analysis can help. Particularly,
like I say, it takes 5 minutes. It's very simple, isn't it?
That's it. And particularly like me, if I don't have a coach or anything, and I sort of say things to my wife and children about running, but they're just like, oh yeah, go on, go out running. It really helps me to be a bit more objective. It's the sort of conversation that you might have with a coach. A coach might say, well, what went well last week? What do we need to work on? How are we going to sketch out the week ahead? It's sort of a bit of self-coaching, really. And I was thinking about this the other day, sort of in the longer term, one of the things that strikes me about the Bolton Marathon is, of course, how undulating, shall we say, it is. And one of the things that I've not started to particularly look at yet is the total elevation of the runs that I'm doing within the week. Now, that's obviously going to be a challenge at some point. So it's something that I actually wrote down earlier. I've got to start thinking about that at some point. It's hard to avoid the hills around here, and I quite like running on hills anyway. I mean, that's the big appeal, to be honest, of this marathon, or at least that's one of them. But I am aware, if you said to me, well, what was your total elevation last week in your running? I'd have no idea. Absolutely none at all. I've just not even thought about that yet. And I think that
That's a really good way of thinking about it as well. And it's another thing to measure your running by.
That's it. Oh, we've just got a comment there. I've not looked at Bolton. Oh, I missed it.
So we've got a few
Right,
comments.
I keep missing, and I don't want to touch my screen now that it's working.
I'll keep touching it. It's probably going to break anyway. I touch it, it tends to break all the time.
It's interesting to see other people just to comment. I mean, how do they do it? I mean, are people following it? My gut feeling is it's probably a bit too early to be following a sort of formal plan. This is like the pre-planned plan in my head. I know
that's how I'd look at it.
I know the sort of plan that I want to follow, but that's not going to be until sort of mid-January. And I also know I'm not fit enough yet to start that plan. So the running I'm doing now is the plan before the plan.
This is your foundation. That's all it is. It's you building your foundations to then build on. Start building your house, like I said, putting your first floor in, put your second floor in. But for me, it's also there's so many plans out there that you can choose from, and everybody's starting at a different level of fitness. So what you want to really try and do, I think, is pick your plan that suits you, and then build up. Take this time now to build up to that start level of fitness, and make sure you're at that level of fitness, so that then that plan is going to work for you. Because the worst thing you want to do is be sat on the sofa for the next 8 weeks doing very little, and then pick a plan that's going to push you too hard too soon. Whereas you could get out there now and build on those foundations. It's not a case of going out and doing miles and miles and miles. It's a case of doing some really good quality strength and conditioning, getting those runs in, but then learning things about your trainers, your clothing, key things like that, which is more than just about getting the miles in.
Yeah, that's it. And I think starting now, we've got plenty of time to actually do that. I think that really is key. I mean, a concrete example of that is that last year, obviously, before this year's May Bolton Marathon, we started a little sort of group of us started doing some longer runs about October, about this time last year. And just sort of laying those foundations and just experimenting a little bit. And we actually learned quite a lot doing that. There's been a lot of discussion about things like nutrition and so on, which I'm not particularly good at and never have been very good at. Even doing some of the longer stuff than marathons, I just struggle to eat, to be honest. And actually drink anything can really sort of irritate me. But it was quite interesting starting that early and doing some of those longer runs and just starting to realise, what I did need to do, maybe what I could get away with and not do. There's plenty of time to experiment. But all of that was before starting the formal plan. So it meant that when we did start a more formal plan, we were already sort of fairly strong and confident, really.
And it doesn't matter that if you start a plan and your first 3-4 weeks is fairly comfortable, because that just makes life a little bit easier for you, doesn't it? You don't always have to be. I think there's a misconception that every run has to push you. You have to be out of breath. You have to be hot and sweaty. And that's not always the case, because if you end up doing that every run, you're probably going to suffer.
Not at all. I posted something, I can't remember where it was it might have been in the Facebook group, but just about, that's another thing I've got to avoid, is just training in that grey zone. For me, I know when I reflect back and I do that little sort of SWOT analysis on things I've done before, when I look back at Strava or whatever, I can see that a lot of my training has fallen into that zone where it's been too fast and too hard to recover. So I'm not really recovering adequately from a lot of runs, but it's not been fast enough to actually get much fitter. All that's happened over a period of time is, just becoming more tired and a bit more worn down, and my hamstrings have become a bit battered and so on. So I think that's really, really key. There are no prizes and no medals for training hard.
No, you just get tired.
That's not, and that is one of the hard parts of training. One of the challenges of training is actually trying to do those right things at the right time and actually just rein it in sometimes.
I think that leads us on to a question that Rachel posted a little bit earlier. One of the very first comments. First time training for a marathon. How many times in a week should I run? At present, doing three small 5Ks and then a long run on a Sunday. What do you think, Marcus?
Well, I think it's always a tricky question when people ask you that without knowing like how long people have been running for, what their previous activity levels are, what their aspirations are for the marathon, and so on and so on. What I would say is that even if somebody has got a relatively limited background, if people are up to training 4 times a week and they're doing 3 lots of 5Ks and a longer run, then it sounds like they're absolutely in the right place. It really, I mean, obviously it's hard to answer anything more specific than that, but I am sure that with that gradual approach and just not building up every single run, because I think it would be important to keep some of those runs short, but just very slowly and incrementally building that long run up, not even every week, but maybe building up for 3 weeks and then bringing it down for the 4th week, and adding a bit of variety in possibly. So making one of those runs a bit less structured, so looking up something like fartlek training, for example, where you're just running short, unstructured periods of time at a greater speed and intensity and then recovering adequately between them. Fitness can really improve just with those 2 simple things.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that. If you're running 3 5Ks, definitely make one of them, or even 2 of them, a varied session, be it intervals, fartlek, speed, hills. You know, because if you did 5K of hill sprints, you'd be absolutely shattered. That would be a really hard session, but it would be a very beneficial session.
Yeah, and then just slowly nudging up that long run. But I think once people have started running, I genuinely think it's harder to go from being inactive to running 5K than it is from running 20K or a half marathon. Yeah. It's harder to move from nothing to 3 miles than it is from 3 to 13, I think. I really genuinely do. Like most things in life, the hard thing's actually getting going with it and getting into the habit of doing it. Because once you're into the habit, I think you can start to build some momentum then.
It becomes a lifestyle choice. It's part of your day. It's part of your routine. I always say that exercise in general should be as habitual as brushing your teeth every day. And when it is, you don't think about it. You don't think about brushing your teeth. If you don't think about exercise, you've got it at the right level.
Absolutely. In fact, that's really struck a chord. I really genuinely believe that. Because you see a lot of questions about people being motivated and so on, and I get that, you know. But also half of me sort of doesn't as well, because I think it's more about habits. You know, when people talk about being motivated for the training, to me, I always sort of think what you're really saying is you're not quite in the mood to do the training yet. And I sometimes think people get it the wrong way around. I mean, I run for all sorts of reasons, but one of them is actually to improve my mood. If I waited to be in the right mood, Rich, for anything, I would never get anything done. I wouldn't get out of bed. But I do know that, you know, my mood improves while I'm doing something, and certainly afterwards. And that's definitely the case with running. I have a love-hate relationship with running. I absolutely love it when I've finished and I've got back. And part of that is just habit. I try not to, once I've done that little reflection on a Sunday, and it's in my calendar. The reason why I do that is because then I don't have to think about it in the week. I just know that I'm going to do it. And whether I'm motivated to do it or not is absolutely irrelevant. You know, nobody's really motivated to brush their teeth, for example. It is just habit. We do just do it. I'm not motivated to drive anywhere. I just want to drive sometimes. So you know, so we do it. Yeah. And I think that's really served me quite well over the years. Not worrying too much about whether I'm motivated or so on.
Yeah, I think there is an element until you get that habit. You need to find something to
Yes.
drive you to be it a medal, that feeling, that pat on the back, well done.
Well, using the Facebook group, for example, you know, all the challenges, the doorstep challenge, the twin time challenge, just using that Facebook group. That's one of the things I've been really pleased with. You know, that sense of community that's building up around the event, and the supportive aspect around the event. I think that's really quite important.
And that's always ever present on the Facebook support group. But there's so much going on there, I can't see it all. I can't keep up with all of it sometimes.
Yeah,
but that's
absolutely.
good.
Absolutely. A lot of people talk about mixing the training up, which is good.
Yeah, Scott's had a question about speed. What would you say about trying to gain speed? Would you try it on your runs, or would you be doing a speed hill session separately? I suppose for me, I'd do separate speed sessions. You're either on or you're off speed. Speed is about going flat out. If you want to go fast for longer, that's endurance. That's different. That's where your interval sessions come in. But for me, a speed session is about running as fast as you possibly can for a short period of time, and then repeating it until your performance starts to drop. And when it starts to drop, that's when you start moving into endurance. So I would always do speed sessions separately if I could.
Yeah.
And hill sessions as well. A good quality hill session will absolutely annihilate your legs and your lungs. So you don't really want to do it with something else, because then you can be really specific about what you want to do.
I think speed for a marathon is really, it's quite a tricky one to get your head around, isn't it? Because we are really talking about endurance. And even unless you are a genuinely elite marathon runner, you're never really anywhere in the marathon approaching anywhere near your top end speed, are you?
No, nowhere near.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. So it's always a tricky one to get your head around. I mean, there's other things that people can do as well, and that's within things like long runs, for example. I like thinking about, instead of just doing the long run at the same pace all of the time, you know, there's things like progression runs, which a lot of like the Kenyan athletes, for example, do these quite a lot, where they start off, they're just walking. And they're literally, even these guys who are capable of 4.5 minute miling are literally doing 12-minute miles at the beginning. And then gradually and slowly just start to build the pace up. And I think that's a really nice way of thinking about speed as well, because people are starting then to really tax themselves when they've already got quite a lot of mileage in their legs. So there's loads of different things for speed. There's a famous session where a lot of runners will do 800 meter reps, and they'll try and do. It came about from a guy called Bart Yasso. They will try, so they're called Yasso 800s, and the idea is that if you were aiming for, say, a 4-hour marathon, that you'd do 800 meter repetitions, and you'd do those in then 4 minutes, have a couple of minutes recovery, go again, 4 minutes, and again. And if you can sort of do 8 lots of that, 10 lots of that, there's always been this myth that then you're on target. So
it sounds horrific.
If you think about it, if you actually start doing the correlation between how fast that is and your marathon target pace, it's not as bad as you might think. So, for example, if you were aiming for a 4-hour marathon, then the reps, the 800 meter reps, they're like 8-minute mile pace. So, you know, you're in the right sort of ballpark. But there's loads of sessions for speed work within the marathon.
But definitely, hills is the one to work on.
I think for the Bolton Marathon, I was saying to my friend the other day, you know, if we're out running and we see a hill, we're just going to go up it. And it's as simple as that. I quite like doing hill sessions repetitions on the hill. There's some fantastic ones in Leverhulme Park near where I live, which are brilliant. Obviously in the daylight because you're off road as well. You're surrounded by the trees and everything else. Fantastic hill sessions, really good. Bit difficult to do in winter unless it's the weekend. So I think one of the next best things really, and one of the things that most closely probably fits in with the marathon is just to get uphill as much as possible. And also come downhill, because the other thing with hill sessions is sometimes people can take the recovery too easy, whereas in the marathon, of course, you know, we're not going to be having a rest, well, probably not having a rest at the top of Claypool Lane. We're going to want to get down the other side as quick as possible as well.
And you use different muscles when you run downhill.
Absolutely.
If you're not used to running downhill for prolonged periods of time, if you then start running down from Claypool Road, by the time you get to Little Lever, your quads will be on fire.
That's it. It does. That braking effect on down the front of your legs can be something else. Yeah. So get on the hill.
And then that comes back to strengthening your legs, because you might end up with sore knees and then leading into runner's knee and all the rest of it because of all the downhill running. Whereas if you use this time now, before you start any training, any sort of specific marathon plan, to build that strength in your legs, you're going to find the running downhill far easier.
Exactly. So if you're doing that little SWOT analysis about strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, if your weakness is hills, or if you know that that's going to be a bit of an issue, now's the time, because there is plenty of time. There really is. So somebody was saying earlier about their 3 5Ks. You know, one of those, for example, every 2 weeks or every week even, could just be as hilly as possible. And you can have some quite good fun then, marathon training, because you can deliberately think to yourself, I want to make things as hilly as possible. I'm going to find a route as hilly as possible. I've just seen a question that's popped up and it said something about strength work for hills. I think that was it.
Yes. Specific strength.
I'm not a coach by any stretch of the imagination, but I think run on hills as far as possible. I think the marathon really is. I think running is very specific, and I think a lot of the time people do look for other training that they can do, and I think that's great. You know, I've done other things as well, not just run. But I always think, unless you're absolutely at the limit of how much running your body can take, then probably the best training for running is actually a little bit more running. You know, to answer that question, I think there is the correlation between, you know, being successful in a marathon, whatever success means to you as an individual, and the amount of running. So I think to answer, I think it was Stella that's just asked that question. My advice would be initially to seek out some hilly routes. And I'd probably be thinking to myself, I'm going to make the uphills slightly easier than I think they should be. And I'm going to make the downhills slightly quicker than I think they should be, just so that your effort levels even out a little bit, and see how it goes. That would be my advice in the first instance, because that's quite easy to do. I mean, there's other ways people do it with heart rate monitors and so on, but I like keeping things fairly simple. That would be the training I would do, and then I'd take it from there.
I would agree to a lot of that. I mean, it's not about sprinting up hills all the time. You can do sessions like that, but they're going to be short, and they're all about building that power in your legs, and also really pushing that fitness to the right, you know, right up to the top. So that VO2 max and all the rest of it. But it's about, when you're running 26.2 miles of hills, you need to make sure you've got enough in your legs so you can keep doing those last few hills. So you've got to learn how to pace yourself up a hill and control that pace so that you can still keep going. If that hill kept going forever, could you keep going up that hill forever at that pace? That's how I always say it. And if the answer is no, tone it back a little bit, slow down a little bit, take some shorter steps, and get to the hill a little bit slower, and it will only be a tiny bit slower, but you'll get to the hill, the top of that hill, in far better shape.
It. And I think that there's some good points there, particularly about taking smaller steps and so on. I'm desperately trying to remember the name of there's a book by Julian Gota, who's an ex international runner, and that's certainly the thing he talks about when it comes to hills. Sort of don't try and like open your stride up to compensate for the fact that it's hard. Smaller steps, try and increase your turnover a little bit, and just relax into it.
The logic behind it makes perfect sense, because gravity is trying to pull you down the hill. So the longer you spend in the air, which you will do if you take longer steps, the more gravity is pulling you down the hill. So the more you're naturally fighting gravity to try and get to the top of that hill. So if you take smaller steps, you spend more time on the floor, and you're spending more time propelling yourself up the hill.
Yeah, that's it. There's another question. I can't see. Can you see the questions, Rich?
I can, yeah. So Scott's just asked, should be pushing at the beginning of the week, so you're running on tired legs for the rest of the week.
Is that?
I would say no. Try not to. You shouldn't be pushing yourself to intentionally so that you're running on tired legs. You will have times when you're running on tired legs, but I don't think that you should push yourself hard at the beginning of the week, because then every session thereafter is just hard, and you'll soon live to hate your weekend sessions if you're always tired for your weekend sessions.
Yeah.
Spread that pain out, I would.
Absolutely. It goes back to what we were saying earlier about differentiating pace and so on, and effort. My run tomorrow is going to be really, really easy. Really, really easy. And I've Tuesday session. So Tuesday is a little session. I've started doing them now that I'm confident that nothing's going to pop in my hip. I've been starting to do some repetition sessions. So not sprinting or anything flat out, but just some strides, just opening things out a little bit. And then Wednesday will be a longer run, but nowhere near as intense as Tuesdays. An easy run on Thursday. So I just keep mixing it up. So I wouldn't deliberately set out to run on tired legs. It's inevitable sometimes that it happens. And I have done that before, particularly with things like Ironman training, where obviously you have to simulate that to a certain extent. But, so you get off the bike and then do a run, and your legs do feel not battered, but certainly feel tired. But I wouldn't structure my week around working really, really hard on a Monday, so that with the deliberate intention of them running on tired legs for the rest of the week. Because you have to recover as well. And I think also the other thing, it goes without saying that training at this point, for me, there's always that little caveat of, I don't want to be adding to. I want to look after myself as well, and I think we all have that responsibility, particularly with everything else that's happening at this time. And that for me, that means also staying well and not getting run down. So eating properly, getting enough sleep, and so on.
It's incredibly easy to overtrain. Incredibly easy. It can just 2 hard sessions can push you to the point of being overtraining. I always say if you have 2 sessions and you feel awful, 2 consecutive sessions where you feel absolutely terrible at the end of it, or you've significantly underperformed compared to what you expected to, you're overtraining. And it only takes 2 sessions. It's not like a week or 2 weeks later. If you get to that point, it's too far. You've probably already injured yourself, and you're probably already struggling.
And even if again, I'm sure people are aware of this, but a good way to keep an eye on that is to actually look at your heart rate monitor. A lot of people obviously sleep with them nowadays, with the devices, the watches rather. Yeah. So to keep a look at that resting pulse. I know what mine is ordinarily, and I also know that I start to feel really tired. And you can actually see the correlation. If I get up and it's 5, 8, 10 sometimes beats higher than normal, I know that I'm feeling tired, and I'll need to take it easy. And it's the same for a run at a given pace. You do start to learn what your heart rate is, and if you see that significantly increase for reasons that you can't really think, like, you know, it's not hot and you're not sweating excessively, for example, then's the time to knock it back.
Yeah, just remember your body's like an engine of a car, and it reacts in exactly the same way. If you overwork it, it'll break.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you don't look after it, if you don't put the right stuff in it, it'll break.
Absolutely.
So it's a good way of thinking about it. If you don't service it, so you don't go for a sports massage or anything like that, it'll break. So you've always got to keep looking after it.
Scott's just said,
yeah, so Scott's just said, I'm still a bit inexperienced. I've done 3 marathons, and the training plan has always been mileage throughout the week, then long ones on a Sunday, so I could achieve a sub 4-hour marathon. I could do with a training plan that over time picks my pace up over time. I suppose you just need to build it up over the course of your training plan. You should have runs that push your pace a little bit more than others. There should be some easy runs but your easy pace should over time just get faster. It shouldn't feel any harder. Your easy pace should just pick up and get a little bit faster over time. And it can take years. It's not necessarily something that happens after 3, 4, 5 marathons. And everyone's different. It could take some people could pick up their pace really quickly, 6 months or 12 months, whereas others it might take 3, 4, 5 years. I always say that there's no runner on the planet that's got enough patience. So it's about having that patience to keep persisting with your training, and you'll get the results in the end. But be patient, because everybody's different.
I think that the thing that I'd probably do, Scott, as well, is look at, if your target's 4 hours for the marathon, is just, I don't know what the pace per mile should do, but I don't know what the pace per mile is off the top of my head for that. But I would do exactly what Richard just said, and that is make sure that within your training, that you've got some runs that are slower than your target pace. So those are your easy runs that aren't necessarily taxing you. Those are your recovery runs. And try and get some time in, not for very long initially, but some times where you are running significantly quicker than that target pace for shorter periods of time with some recovery built in. That could be an interval session, or it could just be a quicker run. And then look at some of those longer runs where you're building in sections. Say if you were doing a 15-miler or whatever, where you might be running 5 miles at your target marathon pace, just so that you can start to get a feel. 9-minute mile, and I thought it was something around there. Just so you can start to get a feel for what that is like. Because if your target pace for a marathon is 9 minutes per mile, when you're starting to run and you're doing sections of runs that are, say, 8 minutes per mile, and your body starts to obviously to become accustomed to that, and you start to get a different sort of training benefit from that. And of course, the whole point is that eventually, if you become used to, even if it's just sections of runs that are at 8 minutes per mile or 7:45 or what have you, 9-minute miling starts to feel then much easier, and you start to become much more confident at that pace. This is where the fun sort of it all starts. So, one of the things that you can do is to look at, well, if it's 9-minute miling, and if you're physically capable of doing some 9-minute miling, get out there, do some runs at 9-minute miling, and just start experimenting and see what that feels like, see what your heart rate's like, see what your breathing's like, or just the old-fashioned try and scale it from 1 to 10 and see how that actually feels. How long can you sustain that 9-minute miling for at this point in time? And then you've got something to work from then. you've got some information that you can use in your own planning. But I think with time, the marathon's a great challenge. I think it's a brilliant personal challenge, because I really do think that with time, it is within everybody to improve some aspects of the marathon. I don't just necessarily mean their time. If you're 80 years old, you might not be able to improve your marathon time. But I guarantee there'll be one aspect of the marathon that you can improve. There really will, whether it's nutrition, whether it's the enjoyability factor, whether it's your recovery afterwards. There's always something, and there's always something to think about. I think that's why it's such an interesting and beguiling challenge. I think it's why it's one that we always keep coming back to. I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever got one right. I'm being serious. I haven't done many. The one, well, I've got one right. I'm not one in the whole time, and that was a marathon that I was using as training for another event. I've always come away from it feeling I didn't, my nutrition or whatever, I just didn't get right.
I'd agree with you. I think there's always something that you'll come away and you think, I didn't do that very well, or a part of the race you just didn't get right, like you say, with nutrition. It could be anything, couldn't it? Or the big one for me is pace. Everybody starts a race, a marathon, at exactly the same pace, don't they? Everybody. You think of a mass start, and everybody's running at the same speed, yet they don't all finish at the same time, or with the same time. But controlling your pace at the beginning, when everybody's going like a herd, that's the hardest bit, because it can take, if you're in a marathon, if you're in a big marathon with a lot of people, it might be 3, 4, 5 miles before you've realised you're running too fast. And then you've got that fatigue then for the next 20 odd miles.
That's it, and that is going to be an issue at Bolton, because they're all uphill. you don't want to be 5 minutes into it and think,
I think Dean Road, within about a mile from the start, people will soon realise if they're running too fast.
They will.
So that's a benefit of running Bolton, because it's a hill fairly early on. You know whether you're running too fast or not, so you slow yourself down. Those flat marathons can take 3, 4, 5 miles, and by then it's too late. So hopefully with Bolton you'll realise that early, and then you can enjoy the rest.
It is amazing how quickly people do start marathons. It really is. I did one a few years ago. I did Windermere a couple of years ago, and I missed the start. I needed the loo. And it was chip timed, so I was one of the last people over the line, and I thought, well, it doesn't matter, it's chip timed. And the number of people that just eventually start coming back to you, and I wasn't getting any quicker, I was just maintaining my pace, is absolutely staggering. It really is. So I think that's another thing. Can I start in a slower pen and hold back? Yeah, I would always say, the marathon does begin at 20 miles. That is the halfway point, I think. Halfway in a marathon is not mile 13. It's mile 20, somewhere near Crompton Lodges as you go up the hill towards Plodder Lane. But that's where the fun begins. So slow start, hold back, pace.
Absolutely. But that's things that people can practice now, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and I'd definitely say make the most of the time you've got now between now and when you want to start your marathon-specific training. To play about with stuff, play about with things that may work, new things that you might not have tried before. You've got loads of time, make the most of it. Between now and January, you've got the opportunity to try different paces, try different speeds, practice your start, get that right. Things
absolutely,
like
that. Absolutely. If this is about training, if this conversation is about training, I think that would be the one thing that I would encourage people to do, and that is just have fun with it at this point. It's this is meant to be enriching our lives. It's not meant to be a source of stress and pressure for people. If we're doing different things and running on different surfaces and at different times and experimenting with all sorts of things, whether it's shoes or to have music and not have music, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Hilly courses, flat courses, it really doesn't matter. If we just ever so gradually, just building up, it, as long as we know, it's a bad way of phrasing it, sorry, as long as we know what that first couple of weeks of whatever plan we're going to be on looks like, and we're building towards that, then happy days as far as I'm concerned. Because 20 weeks, you know, I think it's long enough to get fit, and I think we can all get really fit in that period of time. And what you can't do is mentally and physically be on it every single session, every single day for 27 weeks. So that would be the purpose of this, and just have fun and enjoy it, I think.
Yeah. So I'd say for a look forward then for next week, for people who are watching, I'd say maybe pick one thing that they want to try, and try it this week. Just one thing that they, you know, say whether it's running at a different speed, practicing a marathon pace. If they think they want to run a certain time, can they run at that pace, and how long can they run at that pace for? And then they know how they need to set out their training plan for the next 16 weeks or 20 weeks or whenever they start.
Absolutely. I think that's what I would do. I'd also pick, I really would just pick, to add to that, one thing that people have done well the week before, and repeat that at some point.
That comes back to their SWOT analysis.
Just to pick a strength, something that people have done well, and to repeat it. And I think the reason why I'm saying that is because I think it also just helps to build up confidence, to set that habit. So the session that I did on Tuesday, I'm going to tweak it slightly, but I'm going to do it again this Tuesday, just to start to build that momentum and that confidence. That's absolutely it. Yeah.
Superb. Yeah. Right. Well, fantastic. I think that's an hour of information for everybody. We hope we've answered everybody's questions. But obviously, we'll be back doing this session again next week. I'm not sure if it'll be yourself, Marcus, but there'll still be this same session next week. So we'll check in with everybody next week and see what that little nugget of information is, and that little thing that they tried next week, and see how it's gone for them.
It'd be really good to find out what people have done.
I think it'd be great. Yeah. And obviously, then we can share it, and everyone can learn from it, and then everybody has a better Bolton Marathon because they're better prepared for it. I think that's from a race organiser's perspective, that would just be brilliant if we could get everybody having an amazing time because they're 100% prepared for it.
Sounds good to me.
Brilliant. Couple of things before we finish. So that wraps up the sort of looking back at our training and looking forward to next week. But a couple of things. I wanted to say a really well done to Alan Dunn and Mark Clough, who, for anybody who hasn't seen them, they're absolute nutcases. And this is coming from me, and I'm quite a nutcase. Absolutely an inspiration to everybody. They've run 10 Bolton marathons in 10 days, finishing today. And I think their last one today was about 4.5 hours, which is just phenomenal, having run 10 marathons. So, no, I don't. It's been brilliant. It's been great following them. They've done really, really well. So, well done to them too. And also, looking forward for this week, we've got a couple of good sessions coming up for you. Tomorrow is our Monday motivation session, where I'm chatting to a really interesting guy. He's a guy called Richard Thoday, and he currently holds the world record for cycling Land's End to Johnny Groats on a penny farthing. Incredible bloke. He's got some really good stuff to talk about. I did the chat with him yesterday. It's great. So tune in at 7 o'clock for that tomorrow. And then it's... I gave him the idea. Anyway, and then on Tuesday we've got Josh from Summit Physio, who's going to do a talk about rehabilitation. So that's Tuesday at 7 o'clock.
Brilliant. And they're all recorded, aren't they, so people can see them afterwards?
Yeah, they're all recorded. If they're not on Facebook, they're on YouTube, so they're on one or the other. But most of them will be on Facebook.
Thanks very much.
Great stuff. All right, well done, everybody. Keep up your training, and we'll see you all for this session, same time next
Thanks
Sunday.
a lot.
Brilliant. Cheers, Marcus.
See you
Thanks very
later.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.